In the last few years, we've been speaking so much about live service games, and it feels like the gamers, us, the ones that buy the games, the ones that play the games, the ones that give the feedback to these big corporate companies to tell them what we want from video games. For so many years, they have tried to push down so many live service games, especially with Sony. We all know that Sony purchased Bungie for the main reason that they wanted to focus on live service. They wanted that Fortnite money. They wanted that never-ending microtransactions, and it hasn't paid off, because would you believe it, Bungie, Sony's worst ever acquisition after 765 million write down.
What did he say?
Now, it's only in 2022 where they purchased Bungie for $3.6 billion. I think at the time, a lot of us were very surprised, because it feels like with that sort of money, it feels like Sony should have been buying some indie studios, maybe some AA studios, maybe studios that were coming up that were amazing at making single player story driven games. But I think in light of this news, surely Sony will now realize that, yeah, you know what, we need to stop wasting money, and Herman Hulst needs to go. Who knows, because I feel like the next few games that are coming out, I think they have realized. Now, I know we've had Days Gone, Ben Studio, they were working on a live service, obviously Blue Point Games, that got shut down, even though a lot of people were pissed off with that. They were working on a live service game, and I feel like the next few live service games that are planned to come out, I think this will really show Sony that Stop forcing this BS. We've got Horizon Hunters Gathering. I don't actually know who's actually excited for Hunters Gathering, because once again, I've said before, I like the Horizon franchise. There's no way I'll be playing a live service cartoony. It looks so unappealing. And then obviously you've got potentially Fair Games coming out, which I still think this game cannot come out. Sony has now reported an eye-watering 765 million impairment loss on Bungie, raising the questions, is this platform holder's worst ever acquisition? I think so. I think this could be the worst acquisition ever. Now, this includes a 204 million impairment loss late last year, meaning the value of the developer has plummeted since its 3.6 billion purchase in 2022. So he goes on to say these aren't necessarily cash losses for the company, but a devaluing asset. The Japanese giant is effectively writing down the value of the purchase because it's fallen short of expectations and its performance isn't expected to improve in the short term. Now, I don't know about you, but Marathon was a game that I was not interested in. Like, even with live service games and like Arc Raiders, I haven't played that in so long, but I feel like I've got my money's worth with that. I had really good fun with some friends, and we played a hell of a lot of that game, but I feel like I've got my money's worth. So for me, I didn't want to purchase another live service game. This was going to be the next big thing. This supposedly exceeded over 200 to 250 million, which is freaking nuts. When you look at something like Saros, which I think that's going to sell much more than Marathon, and that supposedly, I believe, cost around 78 million. But when you look at the Steam numbers at the moment, it's sitting at 9,180 players. It's freaking low for a live service game that should be going on. They want you to play this for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years. They want this to be like, you know what? People are going to play this to years to come. They only had a peak of 88,000 players, which is nuts. If we have a look at Crimson Desert, just for an example, this game is sitting at 56,000 players and a peak of 276,000 players. This is a single player game. That is absolutely nuts. That is absolutely nuts. But it says here that the game hasn't exactly set the world alight, which we know. But did Sony overpay for Bungie? It looks like it. He described the acquisition as desperation and a response to Microsoft's unprecedented near 70 billion purchase of Activision Blizzard, which was taking place around the same time. And that's the problem in the industry. Now, I do remember, I can't remember who said it at Nintendo. It was a great interview. They don't follow trends. I think that's an amazing philosophy to go down. Like it's just stated that, you know, with Microsoft taking on Activision Blizzard, it felt like they had to respond to kind of stamp their authority in the gaming industry, and they thought, you know what better place to do it than the original makers of Halo. The industry is always changing. What worked back then won't work now. But for me, if you look at just gaming in general, what has always succeeded? Single player experiences, and Sony's been the main part of that. Sony has been known to make that their main thing, but it's crazy how they would just gamble so much money to get that Fortnite money. I get it, they make so much money from the microtransactions, but I feel like you've wasted so much money, not just on this acquisition. You got to remember Concord, how much that costs to make. And yes, you could say they've writ it off by canceling the game, but there's been so many wasted projects, wasted time on all of their main studios, and I can't believe Herman Holster's still there. So he said, just to compare and contrast, EA bought Respawn about 3 or 4 years ago for 700 million with 400 developers, and those guys generate 700 million a year in revenue. Bungie does about 200 million in revenue, so I think Sony vastly overpaid. Just to compare, I've just got to say that again. EA bought Respawn for 700 million, and Sony spent 3.6 billion on Bungie, and they bring in only 200 million in revenue. Wow, did they overspend. And that's the thing, they were buying them for their live service expertise, which hasn't gone down well. So the development struggled to cling on to players. Destiny 2 has lost many of its daily users. Concluding the story with the final shape in 24. Was Bungie's acquisition a mistake for PlayStation? Yeah, it's been an absolute disaster. I don't think they can turn this around, and I think they need to just stop. Fair Games, Horizon Hunters Gathering. When you mention those two games, I'm not excited. For me, I've bought so many games. I'm like, okay, I'm like the person Sony want to kind of market to. Now, I know I'm a bit older and there's a lot of young people, but the problem is, a lot of the younger generation, they focus on live service games. A lot of younger people don't buy and waste money like I do. I won't call it wasting, but spend a lot of freaking money on these games because gaming is my only hobby that requires money. I don't have another hobby. The gym doesn't cost any money really because I train at work. Will they learn from this? I do think they will learn because I feel like they're going to have to be forced to learn. The big problem for Bungie right now, it's hard to see them where their next win will come. Those who played Marathon do enjoy it, but it's hardcore extraction shooter format means it's always going to be difficult for the game to reach a larger audience. I say this over and over again, and I just don't understand why Sony didn't do this. Is that, for me, I like the graphics of the game. I like first-person shooters that have a campaign. I do enjoy first-person shooters, I really do, but not multiplayer ones. And I just really don't get the fact that this game does not have a damn campaign. I feel like this would be the way for Bungie, for Sony to turn this around. Honestly, if they spent further money on a 20-hour campaign with those graphics, with all these guns, with a better way of telling the story rather than just playing a multiplayer game, I think they could turn this around. I think I would consider buying this if it had like a 20-hour campaign and it was intriguing and it was just cool shooting, because the graphics look pretty cool, but I don't want to buy an online game. I seem to forget that years ago, we got all of these games that came with a multiplayer option. You know, you had The Last of Us that came with the factions. You got Gears of War, obviously it's come out on PS5. That came with the multiplayer. You had Uncharted. What I don't get about the gaming industry is that they try to take away things that we used to get. They then want to charge more money for it. And then they think they can just try and easily sell a multiplayer game where, for me, that's not really enticing. I want to get more for my money. Back in the day when I was a kid, it was always the fact that I loved playing the campaign of a game and then I would dive into the multiplayer. I don't know. Listen, a lot of people that have commented on my videos, they've always said that, you know what? I really enjoy that the game is cool. I'm not saying the game is bad, but I feel like if you're spending 200 to 250 million on a damn game, I think you want more sales than what it's initially got. And I think it's around 1 point something million sales. It sold between 1.2 and 1.4 million copies in its first month. Sales are heavily skewed towards PC, which is crazy. Sony owned Bungie, and to think most of the sales was on PC. So that means that the Steam accounted for roughly 70%, around 800,000 to 961,000 sales. That is unbelievable. Only 217,000 copies. 19% of sales. You could say this is an absolute disaster. I don't see them supporting this game for much longer. I think just try and move over to Destiny 3. Bring out a damn campaign. I remember when Destiny first came out, I didn't even really know about live service. That was kind of like the first live service I experienced. And I was like, oh wow, like I'm playing the campaign. But then there's also some multiplayer and you can go in and do these missions. And I remember at the time on my PlayStation 3, this was unbelievable. But I remember buying it because there was a campaign to that game. So do you think Sony can turn this around with Marathon? Have you played it? Are you continuously playing this game? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe. We're trying to make it to 10,000 subscribers on this channel and 60,000 on the other one. So yeah, anyways, I'll see you soon.